Hey guys, Gian from Hospitality here, and you'll notice that I am not in my office, right? I'm not in the regular recording studio. So I'm currently abroad, working, working remotely with a couple of clients, yeah, this video is going to be shot from here because we need to keep on a pretty current schedule, and we need to be disciplined with all these uploads, because if not, it's like it's going to end up being a dead project, and that's not how projects reach success. So now, talking about projects, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about in this video in particular. So I wanted to talk about project management, from the perspective of short-term rentals. So what are the instances where you'll have to use basic project management fundamentals? So basically, in every aspect of the short-term rental business, you would have to have very good project management fundamentals. So let's look at what are these fundamentals, and what are the steps of a project or the phases of a project, and how do you place them in let's pick a scenario, which is setting up your first Airbnb unit. So how would you use the project management fundamentals into setting up your first unit? So let's do that. All right, so there are three main fundamentals or drivers for project management, which are schedule, costs, and quality. It makes a little triangle. So normally people say that you can only pick two. So do with that information as you will. They're probably right, because it's mainly very, very good and professional project managers that give these classes and say you can only really pick two. You can if you want your project to be scheduled and cost focused, so your quality will suffer, for example. So now that we got this out of the way, what else will we be looking at within the project management spectrum? So let's look at the phases of a project, or let's say the four phases of whatever project you're going to be doing. So you're going into pre-planning, you're going into planning, you're going into execution, and then the wrap-up and completion phase. So what do you do in each of these phases? So in the pre-planning, it looks a little bit counterintuitive to have two sections called planning, but really it makes sense once you get into it. So the pre-planning phase is you still don't have the project really secure and really going for you, but you want to get a couple of things out of the way. You want to get preliminary information so that when the project does hit its planning phase, you can actually be pretty confident in the information that you're going to put into the SOW, the scope of work. Okay, so within this pre-planning phase, it's super surface level information that you're going to start gathering. Since we're talking about the perspective of setting up a unit, it would essentially be the general location that you want your unit to be in, the unit specs that you would like the unit to have, and you would also be looking at what's your budget for what's your general budget for the unit. It could be a range, so that will be way more helpful within the pre-planning stage. So you can kind of like have some perspective of, okay, I can go from this to this, right? Within this price range, these unit specs, which would be how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, are there any amenities that you want around this unit? For example, if you're doing rental arbitrage, or if you already have a unit, then you would be looking at other types of costs that would be implicit if you already own this unit. Right, so now you go into the planning phase. So within the planning phase, now this means that you have this unit in your grasp and you're going to start working on it. Okay, so within this planning phase, you would grab that preliminary information that you had, and now you're trying to answer the questions of what, why, where, and when, right? So what are you wanting to do? Why do you want to do this? Where are you going to do this? And then when are you going to do this? So that is essentially your motives, your process, and then your schedule. These are all the things. These are all the things that go into the planning phase of the actual short-term rental unit that you're going to set up. After you answer these questions, then you start answering the question of how. Then the answer of how is the one that you commence to answer before you go into the execution phase. So the execution phase is just the implementation of the how, right? Because if you already know what your schedule is going to be like or your timeline for the unit to operate, if you already know what you're going to do, why you're going to do it, and where you're going to do it, then you should be all good to then answer how. And then when you answer your how, you go right into the execution phase. Now, since we're going into the execution phase is just that. It's executing the how, right? It's executing the how, taking into consideration the what, why, where, and when. That's basically your execution phase. Then, after you finish executing, you go into your wrap-up and completion phase. So within the wrap-up and completion phase, everything is supposed to be done by this point. I'm assuming that you've crossed your T's and dotted your I's. And then within the completion phase, there is a part of writing documentation. So why would you write documentation? Documentation, I believe, is one of the most important parts of project management. And the reason is that from this experience that you've had managing this project, you will now construct documentation or templates to aid you in your next project. So you don't reinvent the wheel when the next project comes. And that is why documentation writing and template writing essentially is so important. And that's why it's one of the most boring parts of the project management process. It's extremely boring, but it's one of the most helpful and when you're going into a new project, and one of those aspects that you're going to say, oh, I'm really glad that we put in the time to write up all these things, when you're in your next project. And your next project is double in size what you did in the prior one, or it's double in costs, or it's double in whatever aspect you want, you want to say it's double in. So remember these project management, basics that I've just laid down for you when you're going into setting up your, let's say, first Airbnb unit. But essentially, these project management fundamentals that I just gave you are basically across the board for any type of project that you want to go into. If it's setting up a new operational flow, if it's setting up your managerial strategy, if it's setting up your first Airbnb unit, if you're trying to set up your scaling plan, you name it. You can basically say that everything that you go into that you don't know what the process is will be a project for you. So with that said, thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. Hit that like button, subscribe as well if you like the content, and it would just let me know that I'm providing value to you guys, and that I should keep on making these videos. So with that said, thank you so much. Follow me on Instagram at Hospitality5, and follow us on LinkedIn as well at Hospitality. Thank you so much. See you in the next one.